here tonight. Raise your hand if this is your first New Bedford Science Cafe. Awesome. Welcome new friends, welcome old friends. My name is Carrie Hawthorne. I work for Mass Audubon Southeast Region, and I'm very excited to be here with you tonight. If we can all give our friends at the last round a big round of applause. They're not normally open on Tuesdays. So we appreciate their continued support of this community. I know for myself, more than ever, I'm just grateful to have a place where I can come and be in community with folks and learn about things like tonight's topic. So thank you for being here, and thank you. The way we can thank them is by, having a drink, having some yummy food. We were sitting up here like, oh, everyone's making everything look really yummy, so maybe I'll have something to eat after this. If you are having trouble with the hearing of this microphone, please just raise your hand and I'll come over and try and figure it out. We'll do our best to talk into it as much as possible. But without further ado, I'd like to introduce a good friend. Our guest tonight is Marissa Perez-Dormitzer, I always get it wrong, from the Waste Reduction. She is the Waste Reduction Manager at the Greater New Bedford Regional Refuse Management District. Does that fit on a business card or? Okay. And she's here tonight to talk to us about Holey socks, broken gizmos, empty boxes, and stale food. New and better strategies for managing our mountain of waste. And she has some interesting accessories over here and a lot to teach us about how we can reduce our waste and kind of the whole process of where our waste goes to. She has been in her role for 25 years. And she works with the district's 2 member communities, New Bedford and Dartmouth, to educate residents about waste reduction and recycling and implementing new programs to divert waste from the Crapo Hill landfill. Marissa graduated from Rutgers University with a bachelor's degree in environmental engineering. And I'm so excited to learn more from her tonight, so thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you to Carrie for the introduction. And so again, my name is Marissa and I work for, I'm going to repeat it, the Greater New Bedford Regional Refuse Management District. I just like to make it clear because sometimes folks get confused whether I work for the city of New Bedford, the town of Dartmouth, or who knows what. So I'm thrilled to see everyone here tonight, and I really appreciate the invitation from Anne, wherever she is, to speak today. So the Refuse District is a government organization. We serve our member communities of New Bedford and Dartmouth, and we operate the local landfill where New Bedford and Dartmouth's trash is disposed. So I'm a fan of audience participation, so we'll start out with, if you live in New Bedford, can you raise your hand, please? Great, hands down. If you live in Dartmouth, can you raise your hand? Oh, wow, okay, all right, great. So it almost looks like the majority are either New Bedford or Dartmouth, and that's the main focus here. But if you live in other communities, I'm sure some of the tips and information can also apply to you. And so Anne very kindly came up with a nice title for this talk, and I just want to go into a little bit more detail. And so it was New and Better Strategies for Managing Our Mountain of Waste. So I'll talk about new strategies, but I want to focus on better. So who's heard of the 3 R's? Anyone? The 3 R's. Okay, I hear a lot of different things out there. So it's reduce, reuse, recycle. And so the key that I want to point out is that it's actually a hierarchy. So reduce is the top option. Reduce your waste. Let's don't make it in the first place so there's nothing to manage. And then reuse what we have. And then last is recycle. And so I have an example I can mention. So let's say you have a plastic water bottle, they're Poland Spring, Dasani, whatever the different brands are. Yeah, thank you. And so a good option is for you to recycle that water bottle, right? It's recyclable. We don't want to put it in our landfill. But an option that would reduce even more waste would be to use a reusable water bottle. And that way you're not using those single-use water bottles that then need to be managed. So if you're to get yourself, let's see what I'm using. So I like this clear glass bottle, so I bought this iced tea once, and I've been using this over and over and over again for water. And so now I don't have to buy water in a bottle repeatedly. Another example, it's not quite the same analogy, but I like to mention it. I'm gonna pull out my little towels. So I have a coworker here, I'll mention. She's not here for work, but I know a lot of the things that I'm gonna talk about we really connect with. She's in the corner somewhere over there. So paper towels. So we might use paper towels. What do we do with them? Well, the worst option would be to litter them on the ground, right? Let's start with the worst. We don't want to put them in the environment. So better option, secure them in your trash so they're not littering. But even better would be to use reusable cloths. So I grabbed this from home before I came here. I have a stack of towels on my counter in a basket, and so instead of using paper towels and throwing them in the trash, I just wash these as needed. So it's the idea of thinking about, are there better things that we could be doing, better decisions that we could be making? So before we talk about more of these different steps that you can take, I want to talk about the landfill. I think it's really important to understand the local landfill and why it's important. So as I mentioned, the refuse district runs the local landfill. It's called the Crapo Hill Landfill. It opened in 1995. And there's currently an estimated 4 years in our currently constructed cells. So 4 years of capacity remaining in what we've constructed. We are looking at options for permitting and building a new cell. So that's where we're at with the landfill. The landfill brings a lot of benefits to the two communities. So again, thinking New Bedford and Dartmouth. So first is that it's close by. It might not sound very exciting, but let me tell you a little bit more about that. So in Massachusetts, our capacity for trash has been going down. So there's just fewer places to put our trash in Massachusetts. The landfills are filling up and closing. So as a result, more and more trash from our state is being sent to other states elsewhere. Recently, so the last number I have is in 2022, 43% of Massachusetts trash was sent to other states because we don't have enough capacity for it. So that includes New Hampshire, New York, Michigan, Alabama, Ohio. So you can imagine all the resources that are needed to get our trash there. And so this is why it's really important that we have a landfill that's close by. We eliminated a lot of that by having a landfill. It's actually located on the corner of New Bedford, Dartmouth, and Freetown, but physically located in Dartmouth, to give you an idea. And then the other thing I like to point out is that for New Bedford and Dartmouth, they pay a low cost for trash disposal compared to other communities in Massachusetts. We estimate that the landfill has saved its member communities more than $75 million since it opened. Because it's run by the government, it's been run very efficiently, it's not for profit. But once our landfill fills up, once it reaches capacity, the cost for trash disposal is certain to go up. It'll be more expensive for the two communities. So because of all that, it's really important that we see the landfill as a resource and only put things in there that really need to be disposed of in the landfill. So there are a lot of different efforts going on to reduce waste and extend the life of the landfill and the capacity in Massachusetts. So thinking about the state level. So they're doing a lot to reduce waste, offering a lot of grants and programs, but the one I'd like to mention is something called the waste bans. Has anyone ever heard of I know, very exciting topic, the waste bans? No, okay. So the state of Massachusetts has regulations in place that ban certain materials from being disposed of in Massachusetts landfills and waste-to-energy facilities. So these are the waste bans. So I can give you a few examples of the waste bans. So one example is clothing. So that's one of the newer waste bans. There's a long list of things that are banned. It includes recyclables, but clothing is one of the more recent ones that you might have heard about, you might have seen in the media. Can everyone hear me okay? Yes? Okay, I feel a little echoey. Okay. Thank you. So clothing, there are many outlets for clothing. So it doesn't make sense to put them in the trash. And that's the idea of these waste bans. There are other and better outlets for these different items. So clothing, we're going to talk more about. There are clothing bins locally. There's also home pickup options. But that's one of the bans. Another one is mattresses. You might have read about, there have been new programs lately. Yeah. So with mattresses, they can be taken apart and broken up into the different components, and then those components can be recycled. So this is why the state decided that they should be banned. And we're super fortunate that in our area we have a mattress recycling company. It's the Hand Up. And so not a lot of communities have a mattress recycler in their own community. So that's awesome. And then the last waste ban item I wanted to mention is yard waste. So that one has been banned for a really long time. I'm sure where you live, you know that there are programs, I hope. So in New Bedford and Dartmouth, the two communities have programs where you can set it out at the curb, or you can drop it off at the municipal drop-off site. And that yard waste from New Bedford and Dartmouth is brought to the refuse district property where it's composted. So it doesn't need to go in the landfill and take up space because it gets composted and turned into a nutrient-rich soil, so it becomes a useful material as opposed to something that needs to be disposed of in the landfill. So that's the state level, or the waste bans I wanted to point out. And then on the community level, the two communities have implemented great programs to cut down on waste. So in Dartmouth, and these orange bags, is this so familiar? Yes. So in Dartmouth, they have a program called SMART, Save Money and Reduce Trash. And so Dartmouth residents pay an annual fee, and then they have to buy special bags to put their trash in. That's those orange bags. There's sometimes some talk on social media with people about the orange bags. But the program has been fantastic for the town. It cut the amount of trash that they generated in half by implementing that program. Because that makes people pause and say, I don't want to buy another bag, maybe I should make sure to recycle everything I can. So they think twice before putting items in the trash. So that's worked out really well for Dartmouth. And then in New Bedford in 2014, they implemented a cart program. So they have a program, if you don't live in New Bedford, you may have seen there's an orange lid cart for recycling and the blue lid for trash. And trash went down by 30% once the program was implemented. And the idea is that you have to fit your trash in the cart that's provided. You don't get any extra space, there's no overflow, you fit it in the cart that's provided. And so that has helped to cut down. So these programs have been really successful, but I know that we can also do more to cut down on waste, to think about that really important resource that the landfill is. So we're going to take it down to a personal level and to what we can all do at home. So I want to mention three main topics or materials, and then toward the end I'll throw out a few more ideas, but then feel free at the end to ask questions. There's no way I could cover all of the topics of all of the stuff that we have in our homes. So we'll touch the main ones that I want to focus on, but I'm happy to answer questions. So first, recycling. Recycling is a really easy option. Most of us have a cart in our homes, or a bin or a barrel, and you just have to make the choice to put, let's say you have a jug. So let's make the choice, instead of putting it in the trash, you put it in the recycling. So it's really not that much work involved once you know what is recyclable. In terms of bans, these items are banned. So the bottles, cans, jugs, jars, paper, and cardboard, feel funny, they're banned. I feel like I can say that over and over again. But the state bans them, and that is why we have these programs. We have curbside recycling, drop-off recycling in many communities, because these items can be made into new products. See if I have I'm gonna grab a metal item. So metal, I'm a big fan of. So metal is infinitely recyclable. It can be recycled over and over again forever. So it certainly doesn't make any sense to put this can in the trash because you're disrupting that cycle. It makes a lot more sense to put it in the recycling. So as we talked about, most New Bedford residents have the orange lid cart for recycling, where you put everything in. This is called a single stream program. And then in Dartmouth, they have a cart, a gray lid cart for bottles and cans, and a black lid cart for paper and cardboard. And those are collected every other week. That's just the programs that the two communities have ended up with. So let's say you fill up those carts with all your recyclables, set it out on collection day. So what happens next? So after you set it out, the truck picks it up and takes it to what's called, it's a funny word, MRF, M-R-F. So it stands for Materials Recovery Facility. So these are really cool state-of-the-art facilities that use machines and humans to separate out all the recyclables. You can imagine you have your orange lid cart in New Bedford and you throw everything in there. So somehow we have to pull it all apart. The milk jugs with the milk jugs and the cardboard with the cardboard. So this facility helps us with all the different machines that they have. The material, once they have it separated into its components, it's baled. So it's really cool when you visit the facilities. They compress them into cubes, which sometimes look really visual. I like the aluminum bales, they're very pretty. And then they're loaded onto tractor trailers and sent to perhaps another processor where they're processed more, or to a manufacturer who's gonna turn them into new products. So that's the path of the recyclables. I do want to briefly talk about what can be recycled, because I know that's often a hot topic. I'm gonna do my best to hold on to the mic and talk into this one and grab some recyclables. Okay, great. So we have our metal cans, so those can go in your recycling cart. For Dartmouth folks, obviously they would go in your gray lid recycling cart. We have our milk, Tide or laundry jug. Those can be recycled. What would be a key about these two products? How do you want to prepare them before you put them in your recycling cart? Rinse them out, perfect, great. You don't want to put, like I've seen some recycling carts with peanut butter jars full of peanut butter all over the sides. You want it to be relatively clean. But note, there are times residents have called me and said they put their recyclables in the dishwasher. Don't do that. You don't have to do that. They don't have to be that clean. So then we have our plastic, like a Gatorade bottle or a water bottle, and glass. So glass jars, like a pickle jar or a spaghetti sauce jar. Those, give them a rinse and they go in your recycling. What else do we have? We have some paper, Carrie, thank you. All right, so we have paper. Can we grab the pizza box? So that's a hot topic. Everyone always asks me about the pizza box. So we have a pizza box here. Let's do a raise of hands. So who thinks the pizza box can be recycled? Great. Just as it is. There's no pizza in it, it's empty. Good. So the answer is yes, it can be recycled. So they've done studies with greasy pizza boxes, and they found even with substantial amounts of grease on them, that they can still turn that into new paper. So we want to make sure it's empty. Obviously no pizza savers, no little parchment paper or whatever else comes in there. But then that can go in your recycling cart. Anything else? So assorted paper, I see Carrie is grabbing. We have a cereal box. So you would pull out the liner of the cereal box, and then you just put the box in there. But the cereal liner, I guess this is maybe an advanced question. So what can we do with the cereal box liner? Should we put it in the trash, or is there a better option? Okay, I'm going to call my expert in the corner, my coworker. Janet, so, so the cereal box liner, what should we do with that?
That can go to the grocery store, if I'm not mistaken.
It can, so you can empty out the crumbs, and then you can bring it to the grocery store along with other maybe plastic shopping bags that you might have, or bread bags. And they have a program there where they turn that, there's a lot of stuff in there. Oh, my brick, thank you. Got a brick. So they turn it into plastic lumber. That's what it's recycled into, those plastic bags that you would bring to the grocery store. I see egg cartons. I'll mention that as the last item. So with egg cartons, those can be rather confusing. There are different types. So here I've got a paper egg carton. Do you think this can be recycled? Yes, excellent. What if this was a styrofoam egg carton? No, good. And then last thing is the clear plastic egg carton. Can that be recycled? Yes, so that can be. So just as a recap, so the paper egg carton is good for the recycling, the clear plastic is good for the recycling, but the styrofoam ones go in the trash.
Question.
So,
We did have a question about, do all grocery stores have a bag recycling bin?
So I'm not sure if all grocery stores have them. My coworker hiding in the corner has actually done a survey of some of the grocery stores to know whether they have them. I believe Market Basket?
Market Basket, Stop and Shop, Shirky's has one, but it's limited to bags only. You can't put like other kinds of plastic in it, like the plastic wrap that comes around toilet paper and paper towels. But Shirky's will take bags. But nobody gives out bags in New Bedford anymore. So I'm hoping that they expand that program. We'll see.
So to recap, so Market Basket, Stop and Shop, and Shaw's,
Yeah.
and
A lot of the smaller stores like Zebra, yeah, they don't have programs. ShopRite, they don't have a program. I've been to them all, trust me.
perfect. So some of the smaller stores, Janet is saying that they don't have the program. But it gets a little confusing now with these plastic bag bans because some of the grocery stores aren't giving out the plastic grocery bags. But I find in my home, regardless, we still have that type of film plastic. Like we go through a lot of bread, so we'll end up with bread bags. Thank you. Thank you. We also have this type of case wrap that you might find around a multi-pack of something. Some other plastic wrap, maybe this is bubble wrap or something from Amazon. It does not. It could go back to the store though, in the store programs.
Cellophane?
Cellophane. Saran wrap, so no, saran wrap would go in the trash. So in general with recycling, we think of bottles, cans, jugs, jars, so containers. So these kind of wrinkly plastics, they're not okay. Chip bags are not okay, that they go in the trash. I see a diligent raised hand back there.
Sorry, I watched, I think it was Dateline or 60 Minutes, I don't know which one, but it basically said that those programs where they collect the plastic bags from the grocery store was a lie, and they like tagged them to show that they ended up in another country and were getting burned, and so then I basically stopped supporting it. I know that some of it gets turned into Trex, benches, but I heard that some of it is absolutely not, and so I was using those for trash around the neighborhood because I was so discouraged, and so I don't know if you knew anything about that.
So great question. So, I agree, you mentioned using these types of bags for trash around the neighborhood. That's one thing I do. I use them for when I take my dogs for a walk to pick up their stuff. But it's hard to know, I guess. So I've read articles where they put trackers. So I think maybe what Laura's talking about is the trackers that they might put in these plastic bags or other plastic items to track where they go because they want to see, well, are they truly recycled? And so I honestly doubt the accuracy of the information because once you put a tracker in an item in a plastic bag or maybe a plastic bottle, it changes that material. It might make it heavier. And so when these materials are going to different places or being sorted or going through different machines, I believe it affects how they're sorted. So one limitation of my role is that I don't get to follow these items. I don't get to follow them to where they go. So Laura has a good point. There have been articles questioning whether these materials are indeed recycled. But think of what we said, better, reduce, reuse, recycle. So if we can avoid these single-use products in the first place, that would be better. So if we can use reusable shopping bags, honestly, this is better than paper to use a reusable shopping bag. It's better than those single-use plastic bags. You just reuse it over and over again. I have one of these from 20 years ago. So it's hard to know what to believe. I believe, I thought someone might ask me about plastics. So there have been some questions about our plastics recycled. So I've read a lot of articles, I've spoken with a lot of people, and I do believe they are recycled, the items that are accepted in these programs. So the confusion that's out there is, I just read an article today, there was a Greenpeace study that cited that only 5% of the plastics are recycled. But when they're looking at that, they're looking at all of the plastics. These are plastics, the chairs are plastics, go to the hospital, the things they use in the hospital are plastic. So when they say 5% of the plastics are recycled, they're saying of all the plastics that are out there in the world, vinyl siding is plastic. And so that's not intended to be recycled. So it can get a little confusing with the articles. Sometimes I get frustrated because they don't provide enough detail as to what they're actually referring to. But unfortunately, I don't get to follow the materials, so I can't say for sure. I still separate out my film plastics, like the bread bags, and I bring them to the store.
I have a question.
Sure, we can keep going. Yeah.
My question is, some of these plastics, like plastic egg cartons, the plastic, anything that can't be truly recycled into something useful, like your Trex boards on your patio, they end up as microplastics in the ocean, which are super awful. Isn't it not better to have those kinds of plastics in the trash so they stay in the lined landfill and don't end up in the ocean?
It's a really good question, and we talk about that in our office.
Repeat the question.
Oh, okay, I'm gonna repeat the question, sorry. So it had to do with plastics. The example was an egg carton, it was a clear plastic egg carton that they shed microplastics. So the thing is, that's with all the plastics. So I have my Gatorade bottle, and studies show that there are microplastics in here with the Gatorade. So it's a great question. It applies to many items. So in some cases, things may be more secure in the landfill, but this can be turned into a new product. So these recyclables that we know there are outlets for, we know there's a company that's going to make something out of this. I feel in the end that it's better to put them in the recycling cart and recycle them. But it's a concern, of course.
But what about microplastics in the ocean? We
Sure.
want to keep them out of the ocean.
So our clothing has microplastics. Unfortunately, it's everywhere and it's hard to control. So I just suggest for the items that we know can be recycled, bottles, jugs, jars, to recycle them. But it definitely is a big problem, the microplastics in the ocean. They talk about when we wash our clothes, that there are microplastics that wash off in the washer and down the drain, and sometimes end up in the ocean. Sometimes there aren't clear answers for these questions. We just have to make the right choices. Sometimes I see, so people talk about, well, let's not use plastics, let's use something else. Well, what's better than plastic? There are scientists who use what are called life cycle analyses to try to look at the impacts of, well, if I were to use something else for this, what are the impacts? So what does it take to make this? And then what are the impacts downstream? But looking at those life cycle analysis, it's still hard to know what's the best option because they often don't consider everything. And so unfortunately, I'd like to say that I know the answer, but I don't always know the answer. There are just a lot of concerns that we have to address. PFAS obviously is another concern as well in our environment, similar to microplastics. So good questions.
A lot of the triangles have numbers on them, 1 through 5. I've come from 2 different communities, one that takes everything, and another community says only 2, 3, and 4. And we have to pay attention to what number is. They won't accept anything with number 1 on it. Why? I'm thinking it's because maybe the one that's limiting has a certain contract with the people of Gap said they only do that? Were they selling it to versus these bottles, your jar and your top? Do we take the tops off or not? And then I'm thinking, does this mean that we're providing jobs for people to help do the sorting?
Okay, so the question has to do with getting confusing information about what types of plastics can be recycled based on what is in the triangle. You may have seen that chasing arrow at the bottom of many plastic items. So the number in that recycling symbol is telling us what type of plastic it is. So this is likely a number 1 plastic, which they call PET. And so I understand there are different communities giving different information. And I will say this is a time I can plug. So the state has a great program. They have a tool called the Recyclopedia, where you can type in an item and find out what to do with it. So interestingly, I hear you saying that 2 different communities are giving you 2 different messages, but the state has this universal list now for recycling, where you type in an item. They've actually talked to all of these, the MRFs, MRF, those recycling sorting facilities, to see what can be recycled so they can concur and all come together on a universal list. So that's what we go by, the Recyclopedia, the state's program. So I'm not sure what the other communities are doing. I can say that number 1 and number 2 plastic are recyclable when they're in this type of form. There are other types of form that number 1 and number 2 plastic come in. But what the state has concluded, that numbers are really confusing. And the best thing is to instruct people to recycle bottles, cans, jugs, and jars, because it's a lot easier than diving into the numbers. Number 3, I think, is PVC, so I'm not sure that that would make sense that the community accepts that. So 1s and 2s and 5s are the typically accepted items. But again, we can't all be looking at every single bottle to see what number it is, which is why the state has come up with a conclusion that, let's say, bottles, cans, jugs, and jars, and that covers the great majority. It doesn't cover the egg carton, the clear plastic egg carton, but that is recyclable. It doesn't cover a clamshell, like a clear plastic clamshell container. That is also recyclable when clean. But the great majority of the items that these MRFs are looking for are the bottles, cans, jugs, jars, and then paper and cardboard as well. Yes.
There's a lot of plant fiber material that can be made into paper that they're not recycling. I wonder why that is. For example, I mentioned before, is made out of wood. One, and lint from your dryer is another one that you can use in paper. And so there's all sorts of things. Yeah. So I just throw them in the paper, but I think that they're not recyclable.
No, but there are people that are working on new things, which is great. But the lint from your dryer, remember the plastics that shed from our clothing, polyester clothing? So the lint from your dryer should go in the trash. It shouldn't go with the paper, because if we're wearing these types of clothes, they're shedding microplastics. Okay, I understand. So there's also composting. I haven't gotten through my whole formal talk here, but there's also composting. And so with composting, I actually used to put my dryer lint in the composting. But we all learn new things, we all evolve, and when I learned there's likely microplastics in my dryer lint, I stopped putting my dryer lint in my composting. I guess there are some folks who maybe suggest it can go in there. But great ideas, and there are more and more people researching things. The idea of compostable products for us to use instead of plastic products, plans for making things reusable, like there are communities that have reusable takeout container programs where you can check out your takeout container and then return it. And so those hopefully are the things for the future that we'll be working on. Are there any other questions? Yes?
I think you said styrofoam is not recyclable. Why then, I wonder, does the transfer station in Dormitzer separate out styrofoam? What are they doing?
Great question. So the question is, so styrofoam is not recyclable in your curbside recycling cart, But both New Bedford and Dartmouth accept styrofoam blocks at their drop-off locations.
Only blocks?
Correct, only blocks. And so if you were to put styrofoam in your recycling cart, remember in New Bedford, it's all mixed together, those bottles, cans, paper, cardboard, styrofoam breaks up into little beads. And so the recyclers, the MRFs, don't want to have styrofoam in that mix because it'll just break up and cause a lot of problems. That reminds me of shredded paper too, which also would break up, cause a lot of problems, so that's now trash. But the two communities have programs where they collect the styrofoam blocks. So at these recycling center or transfer station, they can collect things in a way we call it source separated. So it's not this jumbled mix of the orange lid cart in New Bedford, but things are separated. And so then they're able to recycle the styrofoam blocks because it's just all styrofoam blocks. And they're actually taken to an insulation company in Bridgewater where they use them for insulation. Great question.
I have a question about some of the private contractors that do your trash and your recycling. Do they come to you, or do they have another place? If they're in Dartmouth and New Bedford, do they come to you, or do they go other places and dump their stuff?
And do you mean the landfill that we run? Yes. So in addition to taking trash from New Bedford and Dartmouth, we do accept some what we call commercial trash. So commercial trash is anything that's not New Bedford or Dartmouth, the town of Dartmouth or city of New Bedford. So there are some private haulers that bring trash to us. More and more, we've actually had municipal customers, so like towns, and so Freetown brings their trash to our landfill, but they pay a different rate because they're not a member community of the refuse district. So there is some trash that private haulers bring to Crapo Hill. We have cut down on it, so over time it's gotten less and less because we want to make sure to preserve the capacity in the landfill for New Bedford and Dartmouth, the communities that we serve.
Do they monitor these trucks when they come and bring their stuff in? Because I happen to know, I've seen one company who's got one barrel for recycling, and sometimes they send 2 trucks out, and sometimes they dump both barrels into the trash truck. And I'm thinking, all this stuff people have spent time recycling is just being dumped into trash anyway.
Okay, so the question is, do we, I guess the district, do we monitor the trash that comes in? So if you remember the waste bans, so we as a landfill in the state of Massachusetts have to comply with the waste bans. So we do inspect the trash that comes in, yes. We do also work with New Bedford and Dartmouth. So New Bedford has mandatory recycling. There's an ordinance that says you have to recycle, whether you're part of the city's program or if you're a business or whatever you are. And similarly, the town of Dartmouth has a requirement that they're called hauler regulations, where they require the haulers in the town of Dartmouth to offer recycling service. So you can't just hire them. According to the Board of Health regulation, you can't just hire a hauler to pick up your trash. They are supposed to also offer recycling service. So these are the regulations. We do our very best at the landfill, I could say, to watch what is coming in, but we also have to keep safety in mind. There's a lot of big equipment, so we can't go up to the piles of trash, rip them open, and have a staff person walking all around checking it. And so we monitor the trash, but in a safe way. And so I'm sure there are things that we miss, but that's why we work to get the information out. There's always things that can be improved upon. No, I agree.
So our community in Dartmouth sends one truck to pick up the recycle bin and the trash. It goes into, are those trucks subdivided so one is trash and one is recycles, or is that a whole fake?
So in the town of Dartmouth, there's one truck for trash. So I know there was a nice presentation where my coworker Janet went to the landfill and got beautiful pictures of the Dartmouth truck unloading. So the Dartmouth trash truck is only for trash. So I know where it could be.
That's the Dartmouth trash truck.
Yep.
Within Dartmouth, there are private communities that have their own haulers. One truck, both types of trash, Do they end up both in the landfill? Or does the truck have two compartments, one for each?
Sure, so there are some companies that have trucks with two compartments. Sometimes it comes down to a matter of having enough staff to enforce that. So that would be the town, the Board of Health regulation that oversees that, the private haulers. But as I said, when it comes to the landfill, we do inspect it as well. We have a process that we're required to follow when there's what we call a waste ban violation. So that means there are banned items to a certain percentage in a load of trash. We have to notify both the hauler and the generator of the waste. So there's a process that we follow. We live in a world where people get tired, where, real world, and sometimes things happen, but we're all doing the best we can to make sure things go in the right place.
What happens to the stuff that gets rejected at the MRF?
What happens to the stuff that gets rejected at the MRF? So a load of recycling comes in to the MRF, and there are machines and people that separate it out. So let's say there's like the plastic, I see a block of styrofoam in there. So there are always people at these facilities. So there's the machines, but there are always people, and so they would then pull it out, and it would end up taking a long route to the trash. They would put it in the trash, which is why it's really important that we put the right things in the recycling.
The regulations talk about, through the Board of Health and whatever, are those state or federal? And do you anticipate with bated breath any changes with the new administration coming in, if they are federal?
Interesting question. So are the regulations that I talked about, are they state or federal, or where do they come from? So the regulations on the haulers, so that's a town regulation. The town's Board of Health requires that private haulers collecting trash in Dartmouth, that they also offer recycling service. So that's town, and then the waste bans that I talked about, those are state. So, and that's why I mentioned the two, the state level and the community level. I don't interact much at the federal level.
And you don't get any funding that helps?
No, we haven't so far gotten any funding from the federal government.
When you get a container that you have plastic on one side and paper on the other, you rip off the paper, you put that there, but the other does not have the code on it that tells me, does it go in the cans and the plastic bottles? So what do you have to say about that?
Sure. So I think what you're saying is that if you have, I call it like a blister pack, like maybe a pack of pens or something, or highlighters, and in the front is plastic, and then it has the paperboard backing. So what we suggest is that, as you mentioned, you rip off the paper and you can recycle that. I'll mention something else after that, but then the plastic, is it a bottle, can, jug, jar? It is not. So then it would go in the trash. So again, this whole system of recycling only works if we recycle the things that these MRFs are equipped to separate. They have, again, humans on conveyor belts pulling things off. There are magnets for the metal. There are optical sorters that help separate the different kinds of plastics. But we have to make sure we give them those things that are accepted in the recycling program. So that type of plastic on the blister pack is not recyclable. I thought I was going to say something else. I don't quite remember.
So I'm from Fairhaven, but I think you might be able to answer this question. A couple of years ago, they had inspectors come and look through our recycling bin because they were saying that if there was a certain percentage of unrecyclable items in the recyclable bin, that the whole truck would be turned away. Like it would ruin like the whole lot. So is that like, can you explain that to me?
Sure. So the person in the audience is from Fairhaven, and she recalls years ago when there were people who went down the street and were looking in the recycling carts and leaving tags if the wrong things were in there. You mentioned that if a load had a certain amount of contamination, that the whole load would be discarded. So from my experience, what I've heard is that these MRFs will charge contamination fees. And so if the contamination, the percentage is so high, then they will charge extra fees because it will be more work for them to separate out all these materials. So good point. Yep. And we did the similar thing in New Bedford and Dartmouth, where we applied those tags to the carts, again with the idea of educating people about what can be recycled.
Can you talk to us about food waste, food recycling?
I'd love to talk about food waste. Okay. So that was in my notes to talk about. We have been focusing a lot more on food waste lately because it makes up around 20% of the residential trash that goes in our landfill. So no brainer, we got to address it. It's not an easy thing to address. I will mention in terms of the bans, residential food waste is not banned, but there, in some cases, commercial food waste, so from like a business or organization, anything not residential, that there, in some cases, that may be banned, or there are certain requirements. So food waste, just to make sure we're all on the same page, what is food waste? So we have apple cores, banana peels, bones, moldy strawberries, things like that. So that's what we're talking about. And so at this time, we found that there isn't really a one-size-fits-all option for residents to deal with their food waste. We don't anticipate that there'll be a municipally funded curbside program for food waste in the near future. So that would mean, I'm saying you won't have this where you set out your trash, recycling, and your food waste. It's very expensive. We also don't have a commercial scale facility for handling food waste nearby. So we certainly can't start a full curbside program, let's say in New Bedford, say we're gonna pick up all your food waste and there's nowhere to take it. That wouldn't make sense. So in the meantime, we're trying to come up with a menu of options for people. We talk a lot about how to prevent food waste. So thinking of our reduce up there, reuse, recycle. So if we don't make the food waste in the first place, then we don't have to manage it. So there are a lot of tips. One of them in doing research is that if we all just ate our leftovers, there'd be a lot less food waste. I see a little echoing there. So consider if you do end up all the time having lots of leftovers, make smaller portions or share your leftovers with others. So that's one thing, prevent food waste. So let's not make it in the first place as much as we can, avoid it. And then second is backyard composting. And so that's something that I'm a really big fan of. I compost at home, I have 3 compost bins. And with composting at home, it's when you take fruit and vegetable scraps, eggshells, coffee grounds, yard waste, and you turn them into this great nutrient-rich soil. One way I think of it, now that it's fall, so I took my dogs in the woods this weekend, so we know all the leaves are falling. Do I see 20 or more years of leaves that I'm stepping through? I don't, because the microorganisms and the insects break down all the leaves. So if you push aside those leaves, you can see this beautiful rich soil underneath. And that's what composting is. You just do it in a container in your backyard. So it's a great option. The refuse district sell compost bins. They're $25 each. They're subsidized by the 2 communities. I will say that it's really grown in popularity. We used to sell maybe 10 to 15 compost bins a year, but in the last few years, we've been selling more like 100 or 200 each year. So for those that can, it's a fantastic option. You don't need to drive your stuff anywhere. We don't need a truck to come down the street and pick it up. So fantastic option. And then next we have the food waste drop-off. So in June of 2022 in New Bedford, we implemented a program where New Bedford residents can drop off their food scraps at the recycling center. And similarly, just recently in this June, we implemented a program in Dartmouth where residents can drop off their food scraps. And so these are great programs. And the one leg up that Janet always reminds me with the drop-off program is that you can also add meats, bones, and seafood shells. Because this material goes to a commercial composting facility. So it's different than composting in your backyard. These huge facilities can generate a lot more heat and break down those types of materials. So that's the food waste drop-off. Janet, I know, she's in my head. She's going to say, mention those starter kits. So in Dartmouth, you can pick up a free starter kit to participate in the food waste drop-off program. The starter kit includes a kitchen bin. Where's my kitchen bin? Okay, kitchen bin. So if you're a Dartmouth resident, you can get a kitchen bin. You can also get a roll of compostable bags. So you would line the kitchen bin with a roll. And then once it fills up, you put it in a 5-gallon bucket that we're also offering with a nice, very nice reusable lid. And so then once your bucket gets close to full, you would bring it to the Dartmouth transfer station. New Bedford is similar. They're just not offering the bucket. They're offering the kitchen bin and the roll of compostable bags.
I'm already doing this through Black Earth, but I collect mine and I drive it when I go up to Dedham, and I drop it off with my friend who has a nice, like, I don't know what it is, a 40-gallon bucket. And seems like it's another option. And when in my conversations with Black Earth, which is up on the North Shore, but has one of these anaerobic composters, if we can get 50 people in Dartmouth to sign up to have one of these, then they will come to our community. So it's a little bit of a grassroots thing. There are towns, probably like Wellesley and other, well-to-do, but very high up on the recycling food and stuff, who subsidize that. And I'm delighted to hear about this program because I didn't even know about it. So I don't know where you're telling people about it, because I use a compost. I have exactly the same system, but my 5-gallon bin goes in the back of my car when I drive to Dedham for various things to see family and stuff. So I'm just suggesting it's great to know that this Dartmouth thing is, but also this Black Earth situation is another option.
So the audience member, I just clarify, is talking about a program with Black Earth that we just launched in Dartmouth before Halloween, where residents can pay Black Earth to pick up their food scraps, like in front of their home at the curb. Is that what you mean? Great. So just before Halloween, we launched a program. This is my last program in my list here. So it's the Curbside Food Scrap Program. It's available to Dartmouth residents. Dartmouth residents would pay Black Earth Compost to pick up the food waste in front of their home. You can set your cart at the curb. So it's a great program. It's active currently in a section of South Dartmouth, so like the Payton area in South Dartmouth. So if you live in that area, you can sign up now and get the service. But for Dartmouth residents who live in other parts of the town, they can pre-register to express interest in the program, to bring the program to North Dartmouth or the rest of South Dartmouth. And the Refuse District is sponsoring starter kits. So I think maybe a little bit like you were saying, so the Refuse District is sponsoring, well, we call them starter kits, for the first 50 customers. And so a starter kit includes the curbside cart, it includes liners, compostable liners for the curbside cart, and then the kitchen bin that I just showed you.
Where would a Dartmouth resident pick up the kitchen bin and all that stuff?
Sure. So again, there are two different programs. So there's the drop-off, and then this very new curbside you pay for it program. So the audience member asked, where do we pick up the starter kit? So if you're part of the drop-off program, you'd pick up a starter kit at the Dartmouth DPW. It's 759 Russell's Mills Road. And then if you're part of this new curbside program, Black Earth is delivering most of the starter kit. They're delivering the cart and the liners. But if you really sign up and you really want a kitchen bin, then you're going to call or email me and we'll make sure you get one. If you're part of the paid Black Earth curbside program.
I had a question on the fluctuating price of these recycled materials, both national and international. What impact that has on the percentages these recycled materials are going to be recycled? Because they're going to only they're in the business of making a profit. So I don't know if you have an answer for that.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. So the question is, so the prices of recyclables, they change. They're actually commodities. So they've always changed. There's nothing new. So a lot of these MRFs or the haulers will have contracts with municipalities that They may, currently what these contracts are, there's a fixed cost. So let's say the city of New Bedford is paying whatever the company is, a certain amount per ton to recycle that material. And so in some of these contracts, though, they allow for fluctuations in the market. So when these commodities have a much higher value, that the communities will make some money off of it. But since you may have heard about this China sword whole thing where these materials used to go to China, the contracts that are made with the communities have changed a lot. They account for, we talked about contamination. So in some contracts, there's, you're only allowed a certain amount of contamination, or else you're charged more, because that's more work for the MRF, the recycling sorting facility. So a lot of this is taken care of in existing contracts. It doesn't mean that recycling is crashing. These are commodities, and the pricing has gone up and down forever. I've been doing it for 25 years, up and down. That's what it depends on so many things. Is the economy booming? Are people buying a lot of widgets and WhatsApps? And there's more demand for recyclables. But the one thing that makes it steady are, again, these contracts that these facilities, the MRFs, have with, well, their customers. I think of the municipalities, the communities, but obviously they have other customers as well, where they set certain terms to make sure they're not losing money. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any truth to the apocryphal story that Fall River once let the landfill get so high that the airport had to close?
So I don't know the answer to that one. I don't serve Fall River. You may have heard Fall River used to have a pay-as-you-throw program, but then unfortunately they went backwards and they're generating more trash. So a pay-as-you-throw program helps cut down on trash like it did in Dartmouth, but it can be complicated and hard to implement at the same time.
Talking about mixture of paper and plastic, and I'm thinking about tissue boxes, which have the plastic liner in it. So in one period, they want you to rip it out, the plastic out, and separate it. But the general public doesn't know that, and is there a need to do that, and what happens?
So is there a need to pull the plastic liner out of a tissue box? So you might think also of a windowed envelope, might be somewhat similar. So the recycling facilities say no.
No what?
You don't need to rip out the plastic liner out of the tissue box, nor do you need to pull out the window. I don't necessarily have a personal story about why that's the case, but that's my understanding. And again, there's this awesome tool, the Recyclopedia. So the state took the time to meet with all of these MRFs, the recycling facilities, to come up with a list for the state. Is this okay? Is this okay? And so they determined that residents don't need to rip out that plastic window or plastic part of the tissue boxes.
The $25 compost bins, are they available at the Dartmouth DPW?
Are the $25 compost bins available at the Dartmouth DPW? They're not. I see you.
Where are they?
So I'm with the refuse district. We own a landfill. They're at the landfill. So it's a little hard to find. So the landfill, to get there, you actually drive through the New Bedford Business Park or the Industrial Park. So I know it's a little ways out there. We hold our hazardous waste day there, so often residents arrive and say, whoa, where am I? It's so far out there. But that's where we have storage and where we have staff to sell them, and so that is where they're available. So again, you go through the New Bedford Business Park. I didn't mention, but I have a bunch of flyers. So one of them relates to backyard composting and gives like the address and the hours for where you can purchase the backyard compost bin. I also add that the bins are $25 to residents, but they cost us more than that. And so fortunately, we have a program where both New Bedford and Dartmouth subsidize the cost of the compost bins to make them more readily available for residents. Because once you start composting, it's a great thing. You can compost so much, just no meat, fats, no bones, no seafood shells. No cheese, Janet's reminding me.
The capacity of a bin.
The capacity of a compost bin? Great, we have it on our flyer. So we sell two types of compost bins. We've always sold, there's this one called a New Age composter. It's like a roll, and it's actually expandable. And so that one is up to 180 gallons. So it can get fairly big. It is adjustable. For those who are composting a lot of yard waste, we find that it's a great option. In terms of actual composting and getting the material to break down, we prefer the New Age composter. But there's another option that's a smaller option. It's called the Earth Machine, which is 80 gallons. And so a lot of residents like that. My concerns about it are that it dries out. So I actually have one at home and I drilled holes in it and I found that it still wasn't enough, so I've taken the lid off of it to let the rain come in. But you can also water it as well, if you wanted. But for some people, the smaller the Earth Machine is just a little easier to handle.
Good question.
I backyard compost, and I found out that you were talking about paper towels earlier. I found out that paper towels and tissues, they compost really well. Is there a reason I shouldn't be doing that?
Great question. So the question has to do with putting paper towels and tissues in your compost bin. So what you put in your compost bin, I know it may sound funny, but it's a little personal. So it depends what you're going to use your compost for. So if you're going to use your compost, so the end product, that beautiful rich soil, if you're going to use it to grow food, I would tend to be a little bit more conservative about what I put in my compost bin. Paper towels, unbleached paper towels, yes, could go in a compost bin. I guess I'd just be concerned on what's in these items. Again, if you're using the compost to grow food, I would tend to be conservative and not putting man-made materials in there and stick more to the plant-type materials. Papers? Paper is plant, but to make the paper, they end up using some chemicals. This paper is bleached, so that'd be my only concern. So I don't like to give people the wrong information, and then they grow food in that. Yes, Laura.
There's a listening session tomorrow night at Lassie with the Department of Environmental Protection about the transfer facility that's proposed at General Fund. I was wondering if you have an opinion on that or thoughts on that.
Sure, so the question was, do I have an opinion on the transfer facility where there's a meeting tomorrow where it will be discussed? So I don't have an opinion on it.
Probably have time for
Okay, great, yes, Ann?
So I'm just curious how many people have a backyard composter here? And all I can say, if you have a backyard that's any amount of acre, however big, you should get a composter. I got one. It reduces and reduces and reduces. I got it 10 years ago. I barely have even gotten soil out of it to use. And it doesn't smell.
Thank you, Ann. So backyard composter, Ann is a huge fan. I'm a huge fan. Janet's a huge fan. The volume goes down, and it's just this fantastic way. We just have a container on our kitchen counter. We put the food scraps in it. One of the kids or me takes it outside. Really easy. If you're putting food scraps in the compost bin, we do suggest maybe putting a little layer of leaves or something else over it, thinking of the little critters that are out there as well. Are there any?
Maybe two more questions, one here and then one
I have
over
a
here.
question.
Yes.
You've talked about the small stuff. The big stuff is what we're going to find on the side of the highway more and more. And as someone who doesn't live with anything new in my house, I grew up with antiques. I live with antiques. I live with things that are 200-300 years old. And now you can buy antiques for next to nothing compared to the crap that is sold day to day. And looking at this crowd here, they're all my age, maybe a little bit younger. I'm preaching to probably the wrong crowd. It's kids. We've got to understand that we have a limited amount of resources. Those resources are out there. You can get them. They're used. They've been used over and over by other people. Use them, because otherwise we're going to see more and more crap on the side of our roads. Because Americans don't like to pay. They hate to pay for trash. We just had to install $100 in Fairhaven. We took a lot of grief about it. I'm not grieving, I paid it. I understand it costs money. But a lot of people, it hurts them. And what are they going to do with their crap? It's going to be like sideways. And I really appreciate what you're doing. This is fantastic. But I think, yeah, exactly. But I think the big picture of everything we buy, everything we own, everything we wear, everything we drive, everything we are in around our home, we have to think that way. How we get that message across to younger people is how it's done. I mean, I don't know what you think. I don't know what you're dealing with all this big stuff, this IKEA stuff that's made with glass that blows up, gets wet, falls apart, got junk all over it. I mean, it's going to landfill. That's where it's headed. There's all kinds of bad polyurethanes, there's all kinds of bad plastics. Everything's bad about it. But that's where it's headed. Because it has a lifespan. Because Americans only want stuff that's What do you think?
So just to repeat, the audience member, you're talking about furniture, really. You're saying, you say the big stuff.
Well, mattresses is all we always talk about.
Mm-hmm.
We always talk about the mattresses. It's always the mattresses. But there's a lot more than that.
Definitely. We talk about the mattresses because this is banned. So all these the communities have had to come up with programs. So I think that's why it's a hot topic. So a few thoughts. So just to point out, I agree with you, it's big stuff like dressers and couches. So again, 20% of what goes in the landfill is food waste. 6.5% is clothing. I don't know the percentage off my head of what we call bulky items like furniture, but it's not 20%. But I completely agree with you. So I'm fortunate to be able to go up to the landfill. For many years, I didn't really have a direct connection to the landfill. And so I get to go there once a month where in doing waste ban inspections. We're actually looking in the trash to see if there are banned items in there. And so the last time we went, I agree with you, we saw what we would think as being good furniture, some things someone could use as many dressers just being thrown in the trash. So I agree, it's a problem that definitely needs a solution. There are some options out there. There's our Brother's Keeper. I know I recently bought 3 dressers. I'm not into fancy things, it was just for the kids. So I got them on Facebook Marketplace. So there are some of these kinds of programs out there to get furniture reused, but there's not enough. So I agree, seeing those dressers go in the landfill is very frustrating. So we definitely need a better solution for that big stuff, like you said, the furniture.
So I have a two-part question. Sorry about that. The first part is dog poop in the building. So I assume as long as you're not going to be using the soil for dog food, you can put dog poop in your backyard compost.
So the question is, can you put dog poop in your backyard compost? I used to do this too, but I don't anymore. I have 3 dogs. This is a lot of dog poop. So we've learned that certain kinds, I know somewhere I have a list, there are certain types of poop, okay, we'll use the word poop, that are okay in these programs. Like we talked about a food waste drop-off program. So I know Black Earth will take, Janet, do you remember off the top of your head, is it chicken poop that they take? So there's certain...
What do you think that isn't consuming meat?
Anything that isn't consuming meat. Thank you, Janet. And so they say don't put the dog poop in your compost because it can contain different things, chemicals,
Bacteria, microorganisms.
Thank you. Bacteria, microorganisms that are in their systems to break down this material. Parasites, thank you. Great, thank you. You're all helping me answer the question. Perfect. So as a result, I personally don't put the dog poop in our compost anymore. And I'm not using it to grow food, but I'm still putting it around the yard.
So wait, then you put the dog poop in the trash?
I do. I put the dog poop in the trash.
So then the thing is, those puppy dogs, I was on the beach the other day, and there was like those puppy pads, and then there were those puppy bags, just moving them. She's like all over the just on the side of the kite. There was just like this water. Made a puppy bag.
So I think it's a little slightly hard, so I'm hearing puppy pads and bags of poop. Yes. So it is going in the landfill, but I'd say to back up thinking of what's better, we want to make sure to be responsible for our puppy pads and our dog poop, and make sure they're not lining the roads. I think you were saying they should go in the right place. But yes, it doesn't, so thinking of what goes in the landfill again, 20% is food waste. There's not 20% of dog poop. It's not making this huge dent in what's going in our landfill. And as the gentleman in that chair said, sometimes the landfill is the safest place to put things. Just like the dog poop. Cat litter, I know, is one that I hear about a lot, especially from Dartmouth residents, because they have to put it in their pay-as-you-throw bags. But that's something, I don't want to compost cat litter, so that is something that would go in the trash.
I know we still have a lot of hands up, but I want to respect everyone's time. You're welcome to stay, Marissa. I'm sure we'll stick around for last minute questions and thoughts, but I want to give Marissa a big round of applause and thank you for joining us. And I really encourage you, the next Science Cafe will be on Tuesday, December 3rd. A super interesting guest, Lucas Ripel, the Associate Professor of History at Brown University and the Director of Science, Technology, and Society, will discuss why museums should repatriate prehistoric fossils taken from Native American lands. So, a different topic next month. Thank you again, Marissa. Again, feel free to stick around, have another drink. Lots of flyers. There's lots of flyers about the things that she covered tonight. Feel free to come up. There are pencils made out of newspaper. Thank you.